everyone. I'm here with episode 4. Now, as I mentioned in episode 3, chapter 3, really quickly, in case you guys haven't watched that, but, the reason why I've skipped, and it's not evident unless you watch chapter 3 to know, is because there's no chapter 4 at the moment, and I'm waiting for the uploader to update. So until then, I'm going to be doing these search and rescue stories, and I actually don't know if I'm going to be able to do 2 chapters of this because even though it seems like it's not a lot, I don't know how time-consuming it will be to read this. It's not a very long story, but again, I'll try to fit in as much as possible. So without further ado, let's get started. Actually, before I get started, it doesn't say of any trigger warning, but I'm just going to throw it in there. There may possibly be a trigger warning. Again, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to assume that there is at some point going to be something that may trigger. Again, like I mentioned in the other one, I don't know what it is that's a trigger warning going to cause, such as maybe PTSD. If you have post-traumatic stress disorder and there's a trigger, I don't want you guys getting triggered. I don't want that shit happening because I know it can be very stressful and very aggravating to actually resolve the trigger. I don't know exactly how you'd word that, but yeah, I want to save you guys that stress. So without further ado, if you guys do not take light or take easily to these kinds of things, or if you guys easily get grossed out or whatnot, I would probably expect that to happen in this one, or at least that to be evident in this one. If you guys, I wouldn't recommend watching this. So without further ado, I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been an SAR, Search and Rescue Officer. For those of you who don't know what SAR means, that's why I read that out. For a few years now, and along the way I've seen some things that I think you guys would be interested in hearing about. One, I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old saying, stay where you are thing. And they don't wander far, but I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Those bother me a lot. And I use them as a motivation to search even harder on the missing persons case I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where the brother was, she told us that she had been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the so-called bear man. Seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but he was a tall and covered in hair like a bear kind of man, and that he had a weird face. We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on. But unfortunately, we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They'd waited at the base of the tree for hours calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere and we never found a trace of her. I have literally no idea where she could have possibly gone, because neither her mother or grandpa saw her come down. A few times I've been out on my own searching with a canine, sorry, as a cane, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs, not hills, not even rock faces, straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling, and in those cases, we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff or miles away from where the canine had led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange nonetheless. One particularly sad case involved the recovery of a body. A 9-year-old girl fell down an embankment and got impaled on a dead tree at the base. It was a complete freak accident, but I'll never forget the sound her mother made when we told her what had happened. She saw the body bag being loaded into the ambulance, and she let out the most haunting, heartbroken wail I've ever heard. It was like her whole life was crashing down around her, and a part of her died with her daughter. I heard from another SAR officer that unfortunately she killed herself a few weeks after it happened. She couldn't live with the loss of her daughter. I was teamed up with another SAR officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to. And we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not by any means pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off of the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night, climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible, muffled screams. The story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night, because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to the base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to the base, the more agitated the woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest and saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing those weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of base ops, the woman turns to me, and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I've had a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear. and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to the ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left that area the night. This is the last one I'll tell, and it's probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this is true in every SAR unit, but in mine, a sort of unspoken regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other SAR officers. But even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors. And at this point, we've all gotten so used to it that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point, we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took a staircase in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. Sorry, guys. Yeah, put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very emphatically that I should never go near any of them. I just sort. Sorry, guys. I just sort of go check them out. But sorry, guys. I just sort of ignore them now and then when I run into them because it happens so frequently. I have a lot more stories, and I suppose if anyone's interested, I'll tell them tomorrow. If anyone has any theories about the stairs, or if you've seen them too, let me know. So I'm going to go ahead and commence with part 2, or chapter 2 in my case. So I logged back on tonight and was blown away by the staggering amount of interest that seems to have gathered. First off, I'll address a few things you guys have brought up. There's been an overwhelming amount of people mentioning the similarity between some of my stories and those of David Pollard's. I assure you, I'm not trying to rip him off in any way. I've not gotten anything but respect for the man. He's actually what inspired me to write this. Because I can verify a lot of things he talks about. We do have a lot of these strange missing person cases. Because most of the time they aren't solved. Sorry, guys. And most of the time they aren't solved. Either that or we find them in places they have no business belonging. Sorry, no business being. I personally haven't been on many calls like that. But I'll share a few that I've seen and a story my friend told me that relates to this. There was a lot of feedback about the stairs, so I'll touch on that briefly here. And I'll also include a story. They come in a variety of shapes, sizes, styles, and conditions. Pretty dilapidated, just ruins, but others are brand new. I saw one set that looked like they came out from a lighthouse. They were metal and spiral, almost old-fashioned. The stairs don't go up infinitely or farther than I can see, but some sets are taller than others. Like I said before, just imagine the stairs in your house, as if someone cut and pasted them in the middle of nowhere. I don't have any pictures. It's never really occurred to me to try again after the first time, and I don't really feel like risking my job over it. I'll try in the future, but I can't really promise anything. A few people expressed confusion about the guy who ran into the man with no face. Just to clarify, when the climber ascended and reached the top of his peak, he saw another man in a parka and ski pants. This was the man with no face. Sorry about the confusion. Sorry about the confusing wording of that story. I'll try to avoid that in the future. All right, on with the new stories. As far as the missing persons go, I'd say half About half the calls I get are related to that. The others are rescue calls. People who fall down cliffs and hurt themselves, get injured by fire. You won't believe how often this happens. Mostly drunk kids get bitten or stung by animals or insects. We're a tight team, and we have veterans who are excellent at finding signs of lost people. That's what makes these calls. Sorry, that's what makes these cases where we never find any trace of them so frustrating. One in particular was upsetting for all of us because we did find a trace of them, but it just led to more and more questions than we ever did get of answers. An older man had been hiking alone on a well-established trail, but his wife called to say that he hadn't come back home when he should have. Apparently, he had a history of seizures, and she was worried that he hadn't taken his medication and he had suffered one out on the trail. Whoops. Before you ask, I have no idea why he thought it was okay to go out alone, or why she didn't go with him. I don't ask about that kind of thing because past a certain point, it really doesn't matter. Someone is missing, and it's my job to find them. We went out on a standard search formation, and it wasn't long before one of our vets found the signs that the guy had gone off the trail. We grouped up and followed him, spreading out in the fan formation to make sure. Oh, for fuck's sakes, man. Sorry, guys. A fucking mouse. I forget this has multi-gesture because I'm used to using the M705. Sorry, guys. Fuck. Where was I? Spreading out into a fan formation to make sure we were covering as much ground as possible. Suddenly, a call comes from over the radio telling us to all head back to the vet's location. And we come right away because that is usually a sign that means the missing person is injured. And we need a full team to help them get out of. Sorry, to help get them out safely. But there's a walking stick. Sorry, guys. Fuck, please. We meet back up, and the vet is just standing at the base of a tree with his hand on his side and the sides of his head. I asked my buddy what's going on, and he points up to the branches of this tree. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing. Sorry, guys. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there was a walking stick dangling from a branch, at least 30 feet off the ground. I believed what I was seeing, but there wasn't a stick. What? Oh, I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there is a walking stick dangling from a branch at least 30 feet off the ground. The little strap thing on the handle has been looped around the branch, and it's just hanging there. There's no way the guy could have tossed it up that far, and we don't see any other signs that he's still in the area. We call up into the tree, but it's obvious no one's in it. We're all just sort of left scratching our heads. We keep searching for the guy, but we never find him. We even bring our canines, but they lose the scent long before this tree. Eventually, the search is called off because there are other calls we have to attend. And past a certain point, there's not much we can do. The guy's wife called us every day for months, asking if we found her husband. Heartbreaking to hear her get more and more hopeless each time, asking. I'm not sure why this call is particularly so upsetting, But I think it was just the sheer improbability of it. That and the questions that were raised. How the hell this guy's cane ended up there? Did someone kill him and toss that up there as some weird trophy? We did our best to find him, but it was almost like a taunt. We still talk about it on more than one occasion. Missing kids are the most heartbreaking. Doesn't matter what circumstances they go missing under. It's never easy. And we always dread the ones we find deceased. It's not common, but it does happen. David Paulides talks about this. Talks a lot about. I can honestly say I've heard about this kind of thing happening, but more than I've seen it. But I'll share on on the ones that I think about a lot that I witnessed personally. A mother and her 3 kids were out for a picnic in an area of the park that has a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other is about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and according to her, she never lets them out of her sight at any time. She never saw anyone else in the area either, which is important. She never lets them out of her sight. She packs her stuff up and they start to head back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very clearly established trail. It's almost impossible to get lost getting from the park area to it, unless you're deliberately going off the path like an imbecile. Her kids are walking in front of her when she hears what sounds like someone coming up from the path behind her. She turns around, and in 4 or so seconds, she's not looking, her 5-year-old son vanishes. She figured he stepped off the trail to pee or something, and she asks her other 2 where he went. They both tell her that a big man with a scary face came out of the woods next to them, took the kid's hand, and led him into the trees. The 2 remaining kids don't seem upset. In fact, she says later that it seems like they were drugged. They're sort of spacey and fussy. So of course she freaks out, starts looking frantically in the area for her kid. She's screaming at this point, his name. And she says at one point she thinks she hears him answer. Now obviously, she can't go blindly running into the woods. She's got the 2 other kids. Sorry guys, I'm a bit tired. She's got the 2 other kids, so she calls the police and they send us out immediately. We respond, and when we start the search for him, over the course of the search, which spans miles, we never find a single trace of the kid. Canines can't even pick up the scent. We don't find any clothing or broken bushes or literally anything that would signify a child being there. Of course, there is suspicion about the mother for a while, but it's pretty clear that she's completely destroyed by the whole thing. We looked for this kid for weeks with a lot of volunteer help. But eventually the search peters out and we have to move on. The volunteers keep searching through, and one day we get a call on the radio letting us know that a body has been found and needs to be recovered. They tell us the location and none of us can believe it. We figured it had to be a different kid, but we go out there about 15 miles from the site where he vanished, and sure enough, we found the body of the kid we've been looking for. I've been trying to figure out how this kid got where he did ever since we found him, and I've never come up with an answer. A volunteer just happened to be in the same area because he figured, well, might as well look in places no one else would think. Sorry, no one else to think to on the off chance the body had been dumped. He comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope. And halfway up, he sees something. Sorry, guys. He comes to the base of a tall... He might as well look in places. He comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope, and about halfway up, he sees something. He looks through his binoculars, and sure enough, it's the body of a little boy, stuffed in a little opening in the rock. He recognizes the color of the kid's shirt, so he knows right away that it's the missing boy. When he calls it in and we're dispatched, it took us almost an hour to get his body down, and none of us could believe what we were seeing. Well, not only was this kid 15 miles from where he'd started, there was no possible way he could have gotten up there on his own. This slope is treacherous, and it's even hard for us with our climbing gear. A 5-year-old had no way of getting up there. Of that, I'm certain. So it wasn't as if an animal dragged him up there, and from what we can tell, he hadn't been dead that long. He'd been out there for over a month by that point, and it looked like he'd only been dead for at most a day or two. The whole thing was unbelievably strange, and was one of the most disconcerting calls I've ever been on. We found out later that the coroner determined the kid had died from exposure. He'd frozen to death, probably late at night 2 days before we found him. There were no suspects and no answers. To date, this is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. This is a long one, so I'm probably going to end it off right about here and continue off with part 2 of chapter 1 of episode 4. So thank you so much for watching, guys, of chapter 2. So thanks for watching, guys. Thank you so much, not watching, listening. Until next time, rate, subscribe, and comment. Thumbs up, like, and share. And until next time, stay spooky and peace out.